A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early, on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. This is the good news for the people of God, and we say, thanks be to God. In October of my senior year of college in Washington, D.C., a good friend and I got it into our heads that for fall break that year, we would drive the whole way to the tip of Newfoundland so that we could be the first people to watch the sunrise on that given morning. Then we looked at a map and realized Canada's actually pretty big. We made it as far as Bar Harbor, Maine, and even that took us 2 full days of driving. But on the third day, in the morning, while it was still dark, we were excited as we got up in our cabin. We got in the car and made our way to the beach to wait for the sun to rise. It always happens in a sunrise, in the quietness of the garden. In this story of Easter, it's 3 women, and like most stories in the New Testament, more than half of the women are named Mary. And things are not as they expect. First, they see the stone has been rolled away, and then they are the first to hear the news that Jesus has risen. This version we hear this morning may feel a bit sparse. It's just a man in white, not even dubbed an angel, who speaks to them. There's no appearance by Jesus. There's not even a clap of thunder. And yet, this is the oldest version of the Easter story, so ambiguous, perhaps not as satisfying as we would hope it would be, in large part because it ends with words that feel more mundane than transcendent. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. This Easter, like last Easter, may feel more mundane than transcendent, and it's the new kind of mundane, not even the old mundane. It's the mundane you feel after you've already spent a whole year in sweatpants. You're a year older, a year squirrelier, and perhaps like these women in the garden, you have spent much of the last year afraid of sickness, afraid of loss, afraid of loneliness, afraid of nothing going back to the way it was before, afraid of missing out, afraid maybe even of not being missed. Fear gets a bad rap, and all too often we think that fear has no place in the Easter story, but here it is in black and white, in spirit and in truth. These faithful women, so faithful that they get up early in the morning to go and care for the body of an executed political criminal. Those faithful women are also fearful women. They find something they don't expect, and they don't know what to do with this idea of resurrection, with this idea of life greater than death, and so they are afraid. A few weeks back, during a week of particularly horrific national news, I was in a small group with someone who said they were feeling despair, and they said they didn't know if they could hope anymore. I said that made sense because hope is a fearful thing. Hope is a fearful thing. It is as fragile as a baby bird or a new shoot that has just come out of the earth. And if hope is faith, if faith is hope in things unseen, then faith is fearful too. The women at the tomb on the first Easter are afraid, not just because they have encountered a stranger, but because it is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. And here they are, asked to hope again. What a courageous thing to dare to love again after you have lost someone so in such a horrific way. Such courage required, perhaps too much courage for so early in the morning. And so they keep their nascent faith to themselves. We were the only ones on the beach. We put our feet in the cold water, and my dog Stosh dug in the sand, and we waited, and we waited. We waited for a long while until we realized that the fog that was hanging over the water would not be parting, and that the clouds had actually grown like this much lighter, and that we had driven 2 whole days, and this was the best sunrise that we would get. And then, as if on cue, it started to rain. And we laughed. All too often, my faith is like that, dawning on me slowly, so hidden that I don't even realize at first that it has risen. I don't know when it came to the women at the tomb, maybe later that morning in hushed whispers over breakfast, maybe that night while they were sitting huddled in the darkness, maybe the next morning or the next. Because at first they may have said nothing to anyone, but at some point they said something to somebody, because we are here. We are here gathered to share their faith, however fragile, however hidden that faith may be in the present cloud around us. Again and again, we find that faith, not in spite of fear, but in the midst of it. And again, we find the courage to share that faith with others, that they too may embrace the abundant life that Jesus offers. And so, even if you just say it in a whisper this Easter, know that Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. And so we, faithful, if fearful people, respond. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thanks be to God.